When you think about why kids enjoy playgrounds, you recognize that part of the fun is getting off of the ground. Swings, slides, and climbers all involve reaching heights not normally available to children. But along with the thrill of a higher perspective comes the risk of serious injury. Safety surfacing offers protection against the most dangerous playground hazard, falls onto hard surfaces.
So you need to have safety surfacing under anything that you put that raises the child off the surface. You know, children are little and are close to the ground, so when they fall, they don't fall far and necessarily hurt themselves a great deal. But when we give them opportunities to raise their bodies up off the surface, then we incur that risk of potential damage. And one of the most critical issues that we're concerned about is traumatic brain injury, when children have head injury from falls.
The major cause of injury on playgrounds is falls, and children are falling off of, platforms, they're falling off of swings, they're falling off of balance beams, many things they can fall off of. And so typically you need to provide a safety surfacing so that when they fall, they will not sustain serious injury, permanent disability, or death.
The stakes are very high when children are able to get to heights that are dangerous. It's easy to lose sight of just how vulnerable children can be when they're using play equipment over hard surfaces. Impact-absorbing surfacing is a must at all times.
If your child falls with their head, especially going towards a hard surface, it's a very severe injury that can occur. Safety surface actually absorbs some of that impact. So if I were to fall, I may not have as severe of an injury, especially to my head, as if it was something like grass or concrete. And yes, grass is not a safety surface. I'm sorry to say that. So when we talk about things like wood chips and mulch and poured in place surfacing, the main job of this stuff is simply to absorb some of that impact and protect children, especially their brains. We don't want their brains jostling around in their skulls from hitting something hard.
The consequences of brain injury can be severe and long-lasting. Never allow children to use play equipment over a surface that doesn't provide protection. According to the Handbook for Public Playground Safety, inappropriate surfacing includes asphalt, carpet not tested to meet ASTM standards, concrete, dirt, grass, and chemically treated wood mulch. If you see play equipment that enables children to climb to any height over these surfaces that are inappropriate for play above ground level outdoors or above floor level indoors, don't let children use that play area until safety surfacing is installed. When it comes to determining whether a surface is safe, you don't have to guess. ASTM International has carefully researched what is needed to protect children from falls off of play structures. Any playground your children use should meet ASTM International standards. The standard that applies to safety surfacing is ASTM F1292, Standard Specification for Impact Attenuation of Surface Systems Under and Around Playground Equipment. This standard relates specifically to how well a safety surface absorbs the impact of a fall. Surfacing manufacturers and installers of equipment provide a fall height rating for surfacing. This height is the distance between the highest part of the equipment that a child can reach and the protective surface beneath it. Surfacing is safe when it can absorb the impact of a child's fall from this height. The standard doesn't specify what type of surfacing is required. It establishes criteria any surface must meet. Among the surfacing that has been tested and approved are synthetic surfaces designed for playgrounds, wood chips, wood mulch that has not been chemically treated, sand, and pea gravel. Safety surfacing can generally be divided into two types: unitary surfacing and loose fill materials. Synthetic surfacing is sometimes called a unitary or poured surface. These are surfaces that are typically designed for playgrounds and are tested to meet standards. Unitary surfaces are poured in place or assembled in pieces. Loose fill materials, like wood chips, mulch, or shredded rubber, are only safe when the amount of fill material is maintained at the depth specified in the standard. Organic materials like wood chips must be periodically replaced since they deteriorate over time. Safety surfacing is also required when play equipment is used indoors. Here, synthetic surfacing or ASTM certified carpet with appropriate padding is used. Tile floors, conventional carpeting, and other unapproved surfaces should never be used with play equipment like portable climbers. With all the different types of safety surfacing available, how do you decide what will work best on your playground? Well, cost is always a factor, but it's also important to consider what is required to keep an impact-absorbing surface safe. Among the approved options are two types of surfacing: unitary and loose fill. Unitary surfacing has a major advantage in that it doesn't require continuous maintenance, but it is expensive to purchase and install. Loose fill materials are more affordable, but are only effective when they are properly maintained. Let's look more closely at each option. Unitary or synthetic surfacing is usually made of rubber or other energy-absorbing materials that are held in place with a glue-like binder. Manufacturers create materials with different shock-absorbing properties, so make sure the material you choose is properly matched with the fall height rating of your equipment. Light-colored surfacing is best since some dark-colored surfacing has caused blistering of bare feet. Professional installation is typically recommended. Loose fill surfacing can be comprised of lots of different materials, all of which need to be maintained at a certain depth to be effective. Loose fill should not be installed directly over a hard surface. Instead, start with 3 to 6 inches of a loose fill drainage material like gravel. Cover that with a geotextile cloth, and then add the required amount of loose fill protective surfacing on top of the other 2 layers. Loose fill manufacturers should be able to provide information about the maintenance requirements of their product and test data on fall height criteria based on impact testing, minimum fill depth data, toxicity, and accessibility guidelines for meeting Americans with Disabilities Act requirements. The Handbook for Public Playground Safety has a tip list that will be helpful as you consider loose fill options. The handbook also has a table listing the minimum compressed loose fill surfacing depths for common loose fill materials. Safety surfacing may be the most important decision you make about your playground. Take the time to research your options to determine what will work best for your play area and budget. When weather or space limitations prevent taking children outdoors, they still need active play. So you'll need to plan for ways to enable vigorous indoor play. Finding an appropriate space can be a challenge, and indoor surfaces are seldom adequate to protect children from falls from play equipment. Using play equipment indoors without the proper safety surfacing and use zones is not a safe choice.
A lot of times when people think of active play, they're only thinking of the outdoors. Gravity doesn't stop indoors. If I were to fall off a climber or a loft or something that I have in my indoor environment, gravity still works the same. I can still fall and still get hurt. So we have to be aware that we still need to have proper use zones, we still need to have proper surfacing, we still need to have all the things that we'd be looking for just to keep kids safe outdoors, indoors as well.
There is nothing about being indoors that makes it safer to get up high off the surface. You have to have impact absorbing surfacing. You have to have the proper space around the sides of the equipment and underneath the equipment, and the equipment has to be spaced apart enough so that the zones of play do not interact with each other in the same way as for outdoors. And you need to control the patterns of flow of children as they move from one thing to another, so you don't have children crashing into one another or getting involved in injuries just from not having sufficient space around the equipment.
Some programs have installed ASTM-approved surfacing in indoor play areas. There are also carpets with padding that meet ASTM standard F1292 and provide approved impact-absorbing capabilities for falls from lower heights, like those from portable climbers. Don't use play equipment indoors that enables children to play above floor level unless you have adequate surfacing. The safest, most practical option may be to use a space clear to furniture without any play equipment that can be climbed. When space is limited, Teachers may need to be more involved in directing activities so that children don't run without direction or play in ways that could lead to collisions. Active indoor play is a challenge, but it's important to find ways for children to meet their daily need for active play.
A use zone is the area around a piece of playground equipment where it is expected that children will fall if they fall off of the equipment. Every piece of stationary equipment requires at least 6 feet around it in order to provide a safe use zone around it. Some pieces of playground equipment require larger use zones because there is motion involved. For instance, swings require a much larger use zone than the 6 feet.
The taller the piece of equipment, sometimes use zones increase. Additionally, there are certain pieces of equipment that can't share a use zone. For example, anything that rotates probably should have its own use zone. Things like swings have their own use zones that can't be shared. So we want to make sure that we have enough space that if a child were to fall, jump, or be propelled off of something, that they're not going to fall into something hard, basically, that can cause further injury.
Use zones protect children in 2 ways. First, the zone determines the extent of protective surfacing required to protect from falls. And second, the zone provides a sign or a warning to other children that movement is likely in the use zone area, and caution is required before entering this area.
If you have any piece of equipment that raises children above the ground, like a slide or a swing, then those have required zones around them to keep other activities from encroaching on that activity, which would produce injury. So if there are children running into that zone. So you can't just declare the zone and try to keep people out of it. You might use a color strip, or outdoors you might use a set of railroad ties to separate that area off. You might use a different colored surfacing material to identify where that zone exists. And those zones are determined by research that has shown what the safety zone needs to be.
Let's look at how the size of a swing use zone is determined and how it helps control movement and limit collisions. A 2-seat swing set in which the pivot point at the top of the swing is 6 feet off of the ground requires a use zone that is twice that length, or 12 feet in either direction away from the swing area. This extended use zone anticipates children jumping off of the moving swing and needing the additional space to slow their momentum. A clearly marked use zone will also alert other children playing in the area to avoid the exit area on either side of the swings. The coloration, texture, and other differences in the surfacing act as a warning to children. Use zones alone are not enough to prevent collisions, but along with supervision, they're an important safety feature. Sliding boards, like swings, allow children to build up momentum in one direction as they use the equipment. Slides are often the piece of equipment that allow children to reach the highest point in the play area. The critical height for a slide is the distance from the platform at the top of the steps on which children transition to a sitting position to the ground. Safety surfacing must be rated to protect from a fall of this distance. In addition to use zones, slide design should be compared to safety standards. Use the Handbook for Public Playground Safety to make sure the size of the platform barriers, ladder entrance and slide exit angles, and other safety requirements are being met by your sliding board.
Slides present unique use zone challenges in that they cannot overlap with other pieces of equipment, so that particular attention needs to be paid to the layout of slides. They tend to gather momentum as they're using the slides, so they can pick up momentum as they go down. They can also jump off of them and use them in lots of inappropriate ways. So therefore we need to take that into account and give them a bigger use zone to use in and around that piece. And also keeping them out of the direct path of the sun so they don't heat up. That's a common problem with playgrounds. The injuries that we see is burns.
Children seem to be able to devise an almost unlimited number of ways to misuse slides. Every child wants to climb up the sliding board, and of course there are lots of inappropriate ways to go down. Supervision and rules are important.
It's important for them to know that one child at a time should be going down the slide. They should be going down on their bottoms, feet first. They should be aware of the area at the bottom of the slide to make sure that it's free of any toys or other children, and making sure that they're taking their turns in an appropriate time. So, one child goes down and they've exited the slide before the next child is going down.
We would have 2 teachers stationed next to or at the bottom of the slide to make sure that the children are getting off properly and making sure that they're coming down feet first and not their head first. Just teaching them the proper ways to use the equipment that we have outside.
The use zone for a slide, like other freestanding play equipment, should extend 6 feet in all directions around the slide. If the slide platform is taller than 6 feet, the exit area should be as long as the height, up to a maximum of 8 feet. So a slide that is 8 feet tall should have its exit area use zone extended to 8 feet. The use zone of sliding boards should not overlap with the use zone of any other play equipment. Children love to use sliding boards, and they can be great fun. But because of the large fall height and the likelihood of misuse, children's use of slides should always be closely supervised. Children can generate more horizontal momentum swinging than in just about any other playground activity. That's why swing use zones need to be so large. But that large open use zone can also be an invitation for other children to run to or around the swing area. So monitoring children's use of swings is critical.
Swings take up a large footprint of a play area, and their use zone cannot overlap with any other piece of equipment. And obviously there's a lot of traffic to and from the swings, and the swing themselves takes up a lot of area when it's in use. So yes, the use zone around swings needs to be paid particular attention to.
When you're in a certain place, let's say a swing, for example, ASTM does have its own standards of how much space you need. Typically, it's twice the pivot point of a swing to either the ground or the seat, depending on the age of the child. But as a teacher, as an educator, you have to use some common sense. We have that, but can we define a use zone by either a physical barrier, by where I stand, or some other way to let children know that we can't encroach upon this just yet? I'm a big fan of any kind of visual clue, whether it be a physical barrier, whether it be a change in color of a playground if possible. Something that lets children know that I shouldn't be running through this because there's a danger that I may not see coming.
Like slides, swing sets come in lots of different variations, and you should check that the design and installation of swings meet safety requirements. Because of the way children use swings, jumping off and swinging empty seats, pay particular attention to the seat itself. Lightweight, smoothly finished, and rounded rubber or plastic seats are best. Children have been injured by heavy, molded animal form seats, wood seats, metal seats, and seats with sharp edges. Full bucket swing seats are intended for use by children under 4 years of age with adult assistance. Older children have trouble getting in and out of these seats and tend to misuse them, so limit access to younger children with adults. Tire swings made from actual vehicle tires can be too heavy or made with steel belts that become exposed with use. Lighter plastic swings molded in the shape of a tire are safer. Tire swings allow motion in all directions and present different use zone requirements. There should only be one tire swing per support structure, and the use zone should extend in all directions 6 feet plus the distance from the suspending members. This is the distance between the tire and the top of the support structure. So if the distance from the tire to the top is 3 feet, the use zone should be 3 plus 6 or 9 feet in all directions around the swing. As an early childhood professional, your primary expertise is child development. Teachers of young children aren't expected to know the details of how play equipment should be designed and laid out. That's the role of certified playground safety inspectors and playground designers. But you should have a fundamental understanding of the most important safety features based on the frequency and severity of playground injuries. When you evaluate the safety of a play area, start with the elements that could cause the most serious injuries.
If you don't have appropriate surfacing for any equipment, portable or stationary, I really would discourage you from using it. The reason why we encourage safety surfacing is to prevent injuries, especially head injuries. So if you don't have that, you're greatly increasing the risk of head injuries. I would suggest getting other pieces of equipment, whether you use hula hoops, balls, balance beams, something that doesn't provide a height for a child to fall off of that still allows them to use their gross motor skills.
Remember, the goal of active play is to enable young children to get the vigorous daily exercise they need and to have fun. Playgrounds are just one way to do that. Another factor to consider is whether your play area is accessible to children or adults with disabilities.
Americans with Disabilities Act is a law which requires that all playgrounds be handicapped accessible. There are various levels of compliance related to accessibility for playgrounds, but the most important that we need to address is the surface of the playground. And we need to be sure that any playground surface is accessible to people with disabilities.
Safety surfacing and use zones aren't features that you, as a teacher, can typically control. They're either appropriate or they're not. Recognizing when children are exposed to falls onto hard surfaces or collisions from insufficient use zones gives you the power and responsibility to protect the children in your care. Each time you visit a playground, make sure surfacing and use zones are keeping kids safe.